interesting as well. Doc Gobbler in chat saying, "You think Gary wants to see himself as an apolitical Martin Lewis type figure?" Martin Lewis is a really interesting character in that, he spent his entire career being as apolitical as possible and just only ever speaking in the kind of terms that we were talking about earlier, the household budget types, the individualized problems, what you can do for your own situation, but that no structural critique whatsoever. And I don't know how much of that was because of his own personal ideology or whether it was just the kind of brand that he wanted to build, but I think it was probably more likely the former, because that's how most liberal types tend to view how economics works, and that he just gave you tips on how to personally manage your finances for a very long time. And then there's this really famous moment, went really pretty viral on the social media platforms, of him on, I think it was on Good Morning, being asked by a viewer calling in to ask a question about her finances, and his response was just, you had this kind of very kind of excitable, he's very kind of animated usually when he does his Martin Lewis segments on these programs, but this face just glazed over in despair, and he just said the phrase, "There's nothing left I can do to help you." And I think that's a moment, I could see the gears turning in his head. I could see him turning from an apolitical person into a political person when he'd suddenly realised that, government fiscal policy has to change, right? I can't stand here and tell you that what you do or don't do is going to impact your finances to make you be able to afford to live. Right? The government has to do something. And now, from being very apolitical previously, his whole platform's changed, and he's being asked to come on to talk about what the government potential plan should be for how to deal with the energy crisis. I mean, he literally went on LBC and say, "I'm agnostic on the solution, but having a market system with a private energy suppliers, but all fixed prices where nobody can compete is the worst of both worlds. Either nationalise the supply or have a proper market and then just have it rather than the worst of both worlds." And he's just literally saying the government needs to change their policy. Our whole energy supply plan for our economy is terrible and it needs to change. And you would have never have gotten that from 5 years ago, Martin Lewis, right?
Well, exactly. Well, you get to the point where the people who, like Martin Lewis, shine the turd of capitalism. There has to actually be a turd there to shine. There has to be something for them to actually kind of grasp hold of to build a kernel of bullshit around. You can't manufacture consent without, the tools with which to manufacture. And the capitalism has simultaneously stripped away all of those potential tools that Martin Lewis or these kind of self-help gurus would give you that they know can't work anymore under the current paradigm. So something does have to change. So like you say, he's never going to come out and say nationalise, obviously.
He literally said it. He literally said, he was on LBC speaking with Ian Dale or whatever it was, and it was just like, this cannot go on. This cannot go on. It can't work, this system that we currently have. Either have a market or just
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
No, exactly. No, he will never come out and just say, we need to nationalise and that's it. He's trying to give you the agnostic kind of both sidesy version of it. Yeah, but there does need to be something that changes. The status quo cannot keep up.
He's actually commenting on government policy in the way that he kind of never would before. And again, it's exactly the kind of people who were supportive of David Cameron because the house price went up, because they were never affected by anything. Even Martin Lewis, whose job it is to teach poor people how to budget correctly, even during all that austerity period, he didn't quite realise that actually, state policy has to change on this, and just stayed inside this money-saving expert bubble of his. But when the energy crisis happened, and even normal middle class people were getting affected by the fact that our state had failed to create an economy that functioned normally for everyday working people of all backgrounds, whether working middle or even upper middle class people were feeling the pinch at that point. And he comes out and says, "I can't help you. There's nothing I can do." And I think that was a real turning point for his own personal politics. He's been incredibly politically active since, in calling out the government, in attacking government policy, in giving prescriptive statements on what he thinks should change in state policy, and coming out and literally being on other programs and saying the government has to provide more help to people on benefits. People on benefits have no money, they cannot afford to live. If these policies are not changed, if this government does not put more money into social security, people will starve to death. And he's just come out and saying these things in a way that he never would before. And I think that I'm really hoping this is going to let a seed change in our politics, right? Even if all of the
Hopefully.
policy of neoliberalism remains under Blue Labour, whatever it is, under Keir Starmer, the broader strokes of how people personally approach the economy, the cultural neoliberalism, like the combination of the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, and people like Ian Dale realizing that actually, maybe our workers should be paid a little bit more, and changing his opinions on these things now personally affects him. These people, in the wake of clapping for our carers, clapping for, in celebrating our key workers during the pandemic, and the ways in which everyone's been affected by cost of living, maybe all of this, everything is personal, everything is individual, nothing is ever systemic, maybe all that thinking might go, maybe that might actually disappear from the public perspective.
You think there might be a change to the post-war consensus of neoliberalism?
I mean, culturally, in the way that people approach politics, I mean, it's already kind of breaking down in terms of how people talk about the policy that they want, right? When you look at the polls for, do we want to have nationalisation? Do we want to... I mean, literally, there were applauses for Nick Ferrari on Question Time saying, send water bosses to jail. That's the level to which people just want there to be proper consequences for the failures of neoliberalism, right? This is why there's poo in our rivers. Send the people to jail, and put the people in prison, whooping and cheering rounds of applause. And the Nash Circle comes and says, nationalise it. She's applauded as well. And people are more amenable to strike action, right? They're still in favour of industrial action in the NHS. And even the RMT, who are literally like public enemy number one when it comes to industrial action historically. Everybody hates it when the tube goes on strike. And even then, during the cost of living crisis, people still backed them. I mean, the numbers kind of went up and down, but hopefully in the wake of people who would usually be politically neutral coming out in favour of a change in our economic model, like Martin Lewis, I hope that has a knock-on effect where, in the wake of what we've seen and how it's affected people over the last couple of years, that even if our politicians are clutching onto the life raft of neoliberalism as all of the holes fill with water and it starts sinking like a dinghy in the channel, that maybe even if all of those politicians don't want to change it, the public fervour that this can't go on, maybe that will lead somewhere. I'm hoping. Fingers crossed. If you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.